Does an orthopedic condition or sports injury have you sidelined? Make your comeback with GW Hospital Sports Medicine. We offer services from neck to toe, including care for shoulders, hips, knees, ankles, and hands. Plus, we're the official healthcare partner of GW Athletics, the DC Furies, and the DC Revolution. Get back to doing the things you love. Learn more at gwhospital.com/sportsmed or call 888-4GW-DOCS. Physicians are not employees or agents of this hospital.
This podcast of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs is sponsored by AAA Heating and Air.
The premier HVAC company in the Midlands is growing. Are you a top HVAC technician?
AAA Heating and Air is looking for dedicated applicants to fill their fast-growing service department with top-notch HVAC technicians.
If you're the best, then they want you. If you're ready to stop working and start a career, you can earn up to $100,000 plus a year at AAA Heating and Air.
Quality candidates will have at least 2 years experience and a good driving record. Benefits include top industry salaries, commission on service and unit sales, set call limits, company-provided take-home vehicle and gas card, company-provided cell phone and tablet, health, dental, and vision benefits, 401k retirement plan with company match, and scaled PTO based on length of service.
Contact Roy and Dana Finley at 803-677-1500 or check out their job postings on Facebook or ZipRecruiter.
AAA Air when you need us. AAA Heating and Air.
It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs, founded by firemen, with Chris Clark.
The 2007 South Carolina class was, at that time, 6th in the country and 4th in the SEC, which is amazing.
Wes Mitchell.
You know, I think if you're South Carolina, you're aiming to at least be at 50%. Then in theory, you're adding talent, you're getting better, you're putting yourself in a position to compete.
And Tyler Head.
It's been a great week for South Carolina. On the recruiting front, still certainly plenty to talk about.
On the home of the Gamecocks, 107.5 The Game.
And welcome into the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Here on 107.5 The Game, Tyler and Chris along with you in studio today. Wes out at another Shane Beamer football camp. He'll be joining us shortly to give us a little bit of an update on what's going on out there. Certainly want to thank Jeremy and Mark for joining us for last hour's edition of the Garnet Trust Hour. And I'll have a replay up of that on the 107.5 The Game podcasting page shortly. But Chris, today we're starting off the show a little bit differently as we have a special guest on the Love Chevrolet phone lines. I want to welcome in former South Carolina defensive coordinator Ellis Johnson, joining us for a few minutes to talk a little bit about Coach Lawing, who we unfortunately lost last week. Coach, thanks for taking a few minutes of your time for us.
Yeah, guys, appreciate you having me on.
Coach, again, thanks for joining us, especially relatively short notice. I know you're driving right now. And first of all, you know, I know you, Coach, you knew Brad Lawing extremely well, coached with him obviously for several years. So for starters, sorry for your loss. I know he had a big impact on a lot of people. And if I'm not mistaken, his memorial service will be tomorrow around this same time, about 11 at Lexington High School. Is that correct?
That's correct. It'll be at the Lexington High School gymnasium.
Should be just a great time to remember Coach Lawing's life. But and so I appreciate you joining us to talk about him and kind of look back on his career and him as a person. He had, like I said earlier, a great impact on a lot of people. I've gotten a lot of texts and shared a bunch of phone calls with some of his former players and people who coached with him and things like that since this unfortunate news came out. Tell us a little bit about just if you could pick a starting point of just what stands out to you, what stood out to you about Brad Lawing as a person and as a coach.
Well, I actually met Brad. He was a graduate assistant at Appalachian State in 1984. And I came in as defensive coordinator and took him and another little graduate assistant named Donnie Kirkpatrick, who, in my opinion, one of the best offensive coordinators in America. Gave him the defensive front, and there we went. And they coached it as well as any group I've ever been around. The thing I remember most about him as a coach is it's just something that he got up in the morning and just loved doing. I think he loved teaching the game, not only to his players, but he took time, you know, with visiting high school coaches or at clinics with other coaches, and, you know, always had time to talk football. A wonderful family. They were a good football family, but they're also very special folks. I think Brad and I had a very good relationship. We coached only 1 year at Appalachian, and I left, went to East Carolina. And then we just kept touch over the years, and we ended up back where he was at Carolina and I was at Clemson for a little while, and would see him occasionally. But then those 4 years at South Carolina, we worked together. So in my 40-year career, and I think his was almost that much, we only worked together 5 years, but we were just very close and kind of saw things in the same light, football and a lot of things in life that we kind of looked at with the same vision. So it was a great relationship. Speaking tomorrow is going to be one of the easiest things I've ever done, because I've got a ton of stories about Brad that I love to share. But it's also going to be one of the hardest things, because just hate losing such a good friend at this time.
And we've heard a lot of former players have glowing things to say about Coach Lawing, and we obviously know he was aggressive when it came to his coaching style, but connected really well with his players. Why do you think Coach Lawing was able to have such a good connection with his athletes?
I guess the code word that keeps popping in my mind was trust. And they knew he knew what he was talking about. They knew he knew what he was doing as far as making them a better player, whether it was harder work or a new technique or whatever it was. So they had confidence in him and they had trust. And it was a two-way street. He coached players hard, but he also was very close to them in a lot of ways. And it was always an open ear if they needed one. So I'm not surprised. I hope it'll be a tremendous turnout. I know that means tremendous amount to the family if a lot of the players came back and were able to make it. It's a tough time of year, especially for some of them that are in football playing or coaching. But hopefully a lot of them will get to come back, because I know they'd love to be a part of it.
It was always fascinating, Coach, to kind of track anytime there was a defensive line coach opening over the years at South Carolina. It just kind of speaks to how beloved Coach Lawing was among the Gamecock fan base, because everybody always wanted to bring him back. He always had so much support of, can we get Coach Lawing to come back here? And I think it just speaks to how highly regarded he was here. But you kind of touched on this a minute ago, the development aspect, the trust he had with his players. But was there some kind of secret sauce that you observed of just how he was able to take guys, whether they were more lightly regarded like Devin Taylor, or whether they were a guy like with tremendous physical ability like a Melvin Ingram, like a Jadeveon Clowney? Why was he such a good developer in your mind?
He was a very good teacher, and he could teach the defensive line things. And I told someone the other day, coaches are just naturally aggressive and hungry and excited about learning new things and getting different jobs and working with different people, et cetera. A lot of them want to be coordinators before they're coordinators, be head coaches before they're head coaches, and et cetera. Brad just always, I think, wanted to be the defensive line coach. And I talked to him one time. He was a 4-year starter at linebacker at Lenore Ryan. I said, have you ever coached linebackers? And I think he told me no. And I said, well, you don't ever want to coach linebackers? He said, nope, I like defensive front. And if you go back and look, he never went after jobs and never tried to get these coordinator titles and all this other stuff. It just was not what his heart was in. It's what he loved to do, was teach defensive line play. And as I said, he not only liked teaching the players. My son went to a school here locally, and the coach that he was going to play for on the defensive line, one of the first things he did is came up and said, I used to love to come over and visit with you guys and talk football, because Coach Lawing was so helpful to me. And I knew right then my kid was going to get coached well as a defensive lineman, because this guy learned from Brad. But it was just something he really loved, and he found his passion in life. I wish everybody could, find what they love to do, much as Brad loved coaching defensive linemen.
And given the relationship you had with Brad, personally off the field, what's something that you feel like people should know about him that may not be as common knowledge about Coach?
I think the biggest thing, and probably a lot of folks do know this, but Brad was a big family guy too. I used to always say, Brad, when you go home, do you talk about anything but football? And he kind of looked at it and said, when you're over here in the office, you don't ever talk about anything but your family. and it was always something going on with his children. his son is a very successful football coach already. He's at the Patriots, and we tracked his whole. Every time we came in there, he had something to talk about Will's football career. And Susie, his daughter, I think when we were at Carolina, she was right around the time in her 20s, and she was at the dating, engagement, marriage. I can't remember exactly the timetable, but Brad loved to talk about them, and he loved her husband, Thomas. He was always happy that she didn't meet somebody when he was at Michigan State because he was scared she was going to go back up there and end up living up there. And he said, I was just so relieved when she met a nice guy from down south. And then, of course, Laura. And Laura was she was the prototype coach's wife. She liked sports. She was very supportive of the players that Brad coached. She was just a wonderful lady as a coach's wife and really special.
Coach, another thing that people always associate with Coach Lawing during his coaching career, his on-field aspect, is just the recruiting piece. And I always go back to his second stint at South Carolina. Maybe some people forget that. He coached under Sparky Woods for a good while. And then, of course, he came back under Coach Spurrier where he coached with you. But when he first got to South Carolina that second time, he always talked about changing the DNA of the defensive line. And he did that. When you look at the guys that he recruited, the Ingrams, the Clowneys, the Devin Taylors, the way it looked by the time he left, or in those golden years, 2010, 11, 12, the way it looked then was a lot different than it was when he first got here.
Absolutely. And, you can't talk about Brad Lawing football without talking about recruiting. And I've made the statement, and I'll discuss it with anybody who wants to discuss it, because I'm sure there's some that will disagree, but I think he's the best recruiter that's ever been at South Carolina. And I base it on production. Players that came in and contributed, players that came in and dominated, players that came in and were difference makers, all levels. He was here 16 years before he coached not only for Sparky, but he also coached with Brad Scott. And then of course, he was there with Coach Spurrier. But if we talk about a lot of the guys we had, and I remember when I walked in the door, we already had Gathers and Aggie Boy and Pepper. And I know Cliff Matthews was already here. He had played linebacker, and we moved him. Melvin had just been signed. Chris Culliver was here. I thought Travion, I'm pretty sure, was here. He might have been in that first signing class we had. But, these guys were there when I walked in the door. And then, of course, you've already mentioned some with Clowney, Dixon, Quarles, Jerido, Devin Taylor. Got all those guys after I was there with him. But I don't get those guys. I go up to Rock Hill and get those guys without Brad's help. And we don't go down and get Devin Taylor without Brad's help. I think Shane would agree with that. He was just a tenacious recruiter. And a funny story, we had worked together, and then I ended up at Clemson. He was at Carolina. I was recruiting a young man down in Conway. And Coach West asked me, so who's recruiting there in South Carolina? I said, Brad. Well, Tommy had worked with Brad at Carolina, and I'd worked with him in Appalachian. He said, well, you better get ready. Make sure you keep your eyes open. I said, Brad, I've worked with Brad, Tommy. I know how it is. So I've been on both sides of the fence with him, and it's just another thing he loved doing. And so if you got on a kid that he was recruiting, you better get ready to work, because he was going to be on him, and he was going to be outworking you.
Coach, one more before we let you go. We obviously know Brad Long was a great storyteller. Do you have a personal favorite story about Coach?
Gosh, I don't know. Y'all need to come tomorrow. I'm making a list, and I hope they don't tell me I got to sit down and shut up before I get to all of them. But I think one of the funniest things that I'm reminded of when I first got there, I told you had some great players and everything, and we had a kid I think was going to be up at Hargrave, and Brad said, well, Coach, you're going to have to send somebody else, if we're going to recruit him. And he said, why's that? He said, well, they won't let me come back anymore. And what had happened? Gathers and Aggie Boy and those guys had already committed to somebody, and the coach didn't want him to come up there and see them. And so he somehow got their phone numbers without the coach and went up there, recruited them, turned them, got them committed, and signed them. And so they told him, don't ever come back. But just the way it was. And he was right. You shouldn't tell somebody can't come recruit a player.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for giving us a few minutes of your time, Coach. And obviously, Brad Long will certainly be missed. And hopefully, as you said, a great turnout for that memorial service tomorrow.
Sound good. Appreciate it, guys.
All right. Again, that was Coach Ellis Johnson, former defensive coordinator for South Carolina, taking a few minutes to share a little bit of his experience and time with Coach Long. We'll come back on the other side and continue on with today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs on 107.5 The Game.
It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. 107.5 The Game.
All right, it's Thursday, and so I've actually got a couple of things, Tyler, to tell the people about Firehouse Subs. Now, today's sub of the day is one that you should probably check out if you've never had it. It's the spicy Cajun chicken. Maybe not as much of a staple to you as, say, I don't know, the club on the sub, the New York steamer, the meatball. You should give it a try. $7.99 for a medium, $5.99 for a small. That's the spicy Cajun chicken sub of the day at all 14 Midlands Firehouse Subs locations. But something else cool that they're doing this month, guys, another type of sub of the day, really, if you want to think of it that way. Your first name. If you have a certain first name each day of the week, Firehouse Subs is willing to give you a free medium sub, any sub, with any purchase. So go get yourself a drink, go get yourself a bag of chips, and if you hit the name lottery, you will get a free medium Firehouse Subs. Today, June 22nd, with your photo ID, if your name is Kiana, Nicole, or Joseph, free medium Firehouse Sub with any purchase. Go to any of the 14 Midlands Firehouse Subs locations. If you want the spicy Cajun chicken sub of the day, you're more than welcome to get that. But again, if your name is Nicole, Joseph, or Kiana with a K, with your photo ID and a purchase, a free medium sub for you at any of the 14 Midlands Firehouse Subs locations.
Got some news going on in the world of South Carolina baseball. We'll hit on that next on the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs on 107.5 The Game.
Blue Ridge Hospice thrift shops are bigger and better than ever, with a new and expanded site at one of our 2 Winchester locations and our 6 well-established boutiques across the area. Blue Ridge Hospice thrift shops attract bargain hunters, treasure seekers, collectors, and antiquers. Mention this ad on your next shopping trip and receive a 10% discount. Blue Ridge Hospice thrift shops gratefully accept your donations, including electronics and furniture. For locations, hours, and information on how to donate, please visit blueridgehospice.org.
It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs, founded by firemen with Chris Clark, Wes Mitchell, and Tyler Head on your home of the Gamecocks, 107.5 The Game.
I think the biggest thing for me is the relationship to start with. I mean, if I don't have a good relationship with the guys, then it's not going to go very well. So I think that's the number one thing that I'm gonna try to. That's gonna be at the forefront for me, relationships, and then from there, like, it's really getting to know the guy, the individual, and how they learn. Like some guys learn in the weight room, some guys learn with us just talking mechanics, some guys can learn in the bullpen, some guys can learn with metrics. So I mean, it's really just a different deal getting to know each individual guy.
Welcome back into the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs here on 107.5 The Game. Tyler and Chris here in the Herndon Chevrolet Studios. Wes Mitchell will be joining us in the next segment with his camp update for the day. That was the voice of Matt Williams, the new pitching coach for the Gamecocks baseball team, coming over from Liberty after Justin Parker departed for Mississippi State just the other day. And we've talked about this a little bit already this week. This was a guy that's been on South Carolina's radar for the past couple of seasons, and this is a position that's been filled a couple of times in Coach Kingston's tenure. So it was an easy name to pick out once they knew that Parker was leaving for Mississippi State, and all indications seem that he's going to be a really, really good fit here for this Gamecocks program.
Yeah, it's really best case scenario. If you're going to lose Justin Parker, which you didn't want to, right? I mean, this is a guy that is probably fairly one of the best, one of the better pitching coaches in the country. When you just look at his resume, what he's done at his previous stops, what he did at South Carolina. And the players, I mean, all indications are his pitchers really, really liked him. Good relationships with them, believed in him in terms of how he developed their games. And I think you look at the trajectory of several of the guys on the roster, and they've really seen their games, many of them, go to the next level under Justin Parker. So it's not a good thing to lose him, but the question is always, well, who can you bring in to replace him? And so they were able to, Mark Kingston was very quickly able to get Matt Williams in here. As you said, Tyler, a guy that he was plenty familiar with, that was involved in a previous pitching coach search. And the stars kind of aligned on this one, right? The timing was right. This is a guy that has deep ties in the state of South Carolina. He's an energetic guy. Yeah, he brings a really good resume to South Carolina. And here's something that I know Colin has talked about, whether it's been on his program with you in the bonus here on 107.5 or Gamecock Central, or even to just my kind of conversations with Colin personally. You now have Matt Williams in the state of South Carolina, and you also have Monty Lee, which that was another big offseason story, is being able to keep Monty Lee on your staff. Those two guys in the state of South Carolina, it's going to be a formidable duo, just to put it that way. And a lot of the guys, you even look at Clemson, right? A lot of the guys that were on that team that was really good this year under Eric Bakich were Monty Lee guys, and a lot of them from the state of South Carolina. And so for people who closely track that, for people who are wondering what kind of effect Matt Williams may be able to have on the recruiting trail, we've heard a lot of good things, and certainly the recruiting in the state of South Carolina. I think that now when the Gamecocks target somebody within the state, they're going to have a great shot because of those two individuals.
Right, and South Carolina's obviously got a lot of change coming at that pitching position, and they went ahead and added a pitcher from Liberty the other day in Garrett Gainey, as well as some others. And it was confirmed yesterday that Eli Jones is going to be coming back for another year. Not that there was a lot of speculation of him leaving or anything like that, but he just went ahead and got out ahead of everything and said, "Hey, I'm coming back. I've talked with Coach Williams. I like what he has to offer, and excited for next season." So definitely a lot of change going to be happening on the pitching front. But again, every indication that Matt Williams has had good conversations with everybody that's already here, and he's already hot on the recruiting trail and hitting up the transfer portal as well, seeing what kind of staffing put together for next season.
Yeah, and that'll be key. There've been a lot of guys that there've been some acquisitions that aren't, Ty Good, of course, being the most notable example, and then there've been some other pitching additions in the portal that have been a little bit more under the radar. A lot of the focus has been on some of the bigger offensive targets, right, out there, some of the bats. But I think when you look at this roster and the needs, finding another quality arm or two out of the portal is something that this staff is certainly looking for. So you would think, in the coming days, there'll be some additional targeting, some additional meetings, some additional movement there. But, Tyler, there was, talking about those kind of big targets, I think there were, not that these are the only ones, but the three that the fan base have been really focused on. Colby Shelton from Alabama, who had a great season for the Crimson Tide. Billy Amick from Clemson, and then Kennedy Jones from UNC. I always get them mixed up. UNC, Greensboro, and Wilmington. No offense to those, but right. I get them mixed up.
Well, and we're talking about Matt Williams, who was at Wilmington, and now we're talking about Kennedy Jones, who was at Greensboro. So Kennedy Jones from Greensboro, UNCG, call it UNCG. And one of those now off the board. Kennedy Jones announced a commitment yesterday to South Carolina, and that was a big get for the Gamecocks out of the portal. He was someone that was immediately, as soon as he hopped in the portal, was immediately going to be a big target for South Carolina. Has a relative that used to play football back in the day for the Gamecocks. It is, I believe his brother is Sheridan Jones, who played defensive back at Clemson. So very athletic family bloodlines, and this is a guy that brings a lot of tools. Colin Taylor, I rely on Colin for all my stats, spreadsheets. Yes, I do too.
Things of that nature. But 2 years of eligibility left to play. He was a freshman All-American 2 seasons ago. Hit .357, 14 home runs, 43 RBIs. He led his team in average and OPS. Only struck out 44 times in almost 300 plate appearances. So this is a guy that has a lot of talent, like a true athlete that they're not now able to add to the roster.
And he was the number 2 hitter for Greensboro, and that's somebody that you can definitely see sliding into one of those top spots for South Carolina on the lineup next year. And that's obviously something that is going to be a big question mark going into the 2024 season. But yeah, like you said, a big acquisition there with Kennedy Jones, some of they were very, very high on.
So now you look at the top four, and I'll rip this off from Colin too. I feel like he's going to have to bill me. Your top four in your lineup next season could be, well, we'll see how it plays out. But just based on where they've hit in the past, at their past stops last season for the Gamecocks, and just kind of putting it all together, you could see at center, Austin Brendling right off the top, who's a lefty. Kennedy Jones in left field hitting second, as you mentioned at UNCG. That's what he did. Then Ethan Petrie, who was solid last year.
He did pretty good.
He did okay for himself. And then Cole Messina at cleanup. And then you go from there, right? You just keep going, and there's obviously, they're losing some guys, but they obviously have some other quality bats, including power bats, down in the order, like a Gavin Cassis, for instance, who showed some great power numbers this year. So between that quartet last year, 355, I believe, was the batting average, 57 homers and 214 RBIs between those guys. So that's some pretty good smoke at the top of your lineup if that's how it ends up.
You'd feel pretty comfortable if that was your 1 through 4 next season.
Yeah. So again, it's coming together well. We'll see. There's some other big-time targets remain out there, some other guys that are going to fly a little bit more under the radar, specifically when you think about the pitching staff. But with a couple more additions that are impactful from the portal, you can start to kind of see this thing coming together. We knew that this was going to be a big year in the portal. It's a big year in the portal last season. You see some of the additions that Carolina brought in from the portal last year, Cassis, Will McGillis, how some of those guys turned out. Now you kind of bring that forward. They had the same, not dilemma, but they had the same need this year to bring in some impact guys from the portal. You could see that happening. Not done yet. Still needs some more pieces, but coming together pretty well on the portal front.
Right, and we'll continue to keep our eye on what the Gamecocks do in the portal as they continue to build towards the 2024 season. Hit a break on the other side. Talk to Wes, who's out at the Shane Beamer football camp. You're listening to the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs, 107.5 The Game.
It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, 107.5 The Game.
All right, if you're looking for a smart home service, someone who can come in and help you really streamline your home's audio, visual, or smart operations, hit up our guys, Michael and Nathan at Integrated Media. Maybe you're listening, you say, well, what do you mean by smart home? Well, it's a way to tie in every single one of your electronic systems in your home into one integrated, see what I did there? Integrated system with the guys at Integrated Media. That can be your TV. It could be your thermostat. It can be your wireless internet, your devices. It could be a security system and cameras. They can integrate it all for you. They could put everything together to where you can control it from the touch of a button, whether that's on an iPad or some other type of tablet, whether it's on your smartphone. Complete smart home solutions. They also do home theater. They do Sonos wireless speakers. They do sound bars. They do TV installation, security, and cameras. They can do one of those things for you, or they can do all of them at once. If you want some inspiration to see, hey, maybe I just want a man cave. Maybe I want a really cool outdoor patio setup, or maybe you want the entire smart home system, check them out, Integrated Media Columbia, on Facebook and Instagram to see some examples of their past work, or even just to get some inspiration, or visit their website at integratedmediainc.com. You can also give them a call, 803-948-8327. That's our friends Michael and Nathan at Integrated Media. It's still your home, just smarter. Again, 803-948-8327.
Well, camp update with Wes up next on 107.5 The Game.
It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs, founded by firemen, with Chris Clark, Wes Mitchell, and Tyler Head on your home of the Gamecocks, 107.5 The Game.
And welcome back into the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on 107.5 The Game. Tyler and Chris along with you. I want to remind you, as always, about our craft beer passport that you can find on 1075thegame.com. Click on the Sweet Deals tab. You can purchase yourself a craft beer passport for just $99. It'll get you 38 beers at over 15 different locations around the Midlands. A $285 value, all yours for just $99. Don't miss your chance on the Craft Beer Passport on 1075thegame.com. We now head out to the Love Chevrolet phone lines. Wes joining us from Shane Beamer Football Camp. Sounds a little bit noisy out there. Hopefully you're staying dry today. I imagine everything is taking place indoors today, right, Wes?
No, actually, all outside, just like normal. So for those who don't know, this thing takes place on about 4 different fields, one of which is inside, the others are outside, and we are full go. I tell you, the difference in an actual college football maintained field versus like your front yard is dramatic. So I'm actually quite literally amazed at how well the facilities here at South Carolina drain as far as the fields go.
You know what, Wes? I have a theory. It's just a theory. Tell me if you agree. Probably Kai Kroger has hooked them up with the Kubota out there to manage the fields out there.
Yes, I cannot confirm that, but I also cannot deny that. I feel like that should probably be the subject of his next Kubota ad read. But yeah, hopefully y'all can hear me, because I got to say these the speakers that they installed at Williams-Brice Stadium last year actually worked quite well. So I was trying to find a dry spot that also is not unhearable as well. But actually, to be honest, y'all, as bad as it looked this morning, the weather is kind of holding off right now. So everything is full go. And it really, frankly, the number of teams they have for these things, it would have been impossible to pull off the entire camp and not use some of the outdoor facilities.
Well, the good news is, and we can actually hear you pretty well, so you've done a good job finding a spot out there. Yesterday, we were both out there, man, and it was lighter in terms of both the overall volume, but also the amount of prospects that, South Carolina's heavily looking at. But despite the weather today, looking over some of your updates here on Gamecock Central, got some guys out there today to watch. Tell us who you've had eyes on this morning.
Yeah, this has been a 7-on-7 heavy day for me. It actually worked out perfectly that the first couple of games, Savannah Christian, which is, of course, the school we've talked quite a bit about. They have Elijah Griffin, the 5-star defensive lineman, of course. I've not put eyes on Elijah. I actually don't think he's here today. But they got several other guys, one being Logan Brooking, a 2025 tight end. South Carolina is heavy after. And then David Busey, who is a guy that can play a number of different positions. He's out here playing nickelback, playing wide receiver. South Carolina's recruiting him as a safety. He's going to take his OV to South Carolina this weekend. Gamecocks, obviously, I think in really good shape there. Then you go on across Richland Northeast has a quarterback, and Will Wilson, who we've talked about, has a South Carolina offer. And then Kelvin Hunter, West Florence, defensive back commitment for South Carolina. All those guys were like right around the same area. So I was over there watching them. It was apparent that, several kids on these teams were wanted by South Carolina, because you looked around. Shane Beamer's there watching. Jody Wright's there. Dal Loggins, of course, offense coordinator and quarterbacks coach, was dialed into what Will Wilson was doing. So those guys were all glued to those first couple of games for those teams. And, all those guys looked the part. I tell you, man, Logan Brooking, though, that's a kid that I think is already firmly on South Carolina's priority list. I think that's a name for South Carolina fans to really sort of start to remember as well, because he's had a really good start to the day. Great body control, great hands, adjusts to the football well. Chris, you've been to enough of these too where you just kind of can tell a guy's on a little bit different level than everybody around him. I would say that Brooking is kind of on that level for me.
And pretty good bloodlines there. Of course, that name sounds familiar. And Tyler, you know about this guy as a Falcons fan.
I remember.
Former linebacker Keith Brooking from the Falcons, who, honestly, I do not have fond memories of watching him play, because he would destroy the pant.
Pride of Druid Hills High School in Atlanta.
That's right. And so Brooking at Savannah Christian Prep, as you said, definitely a guy to watch. Also, Wes, another update I saw from you, shout out to Cardinal Newman putting together the Gamecock squad on the coaching staff.
Yeah, some guys out here, man. Obviously, you got Corey Helms, head coach over there, but a very strong garnet and black flavor. Harry Orth running their offense and sort of operating everything over there, does a fantastic job with that. And then Kawan Lewis, who is originally a guy from the Northeast that some people remember G.A. Mangus recruiting him from his territory up there to come play linebacker for South Carolina. Bumped into him. He's very excited, I think, to be in Columbia, and they actually got a pretty good little thing going on at Cardinal Newman. They've got some players that have come in to play for that staff, and several of them that I think will play at the next level as well. And from what Perry was telling me, they've got a quarterback that can spin it too. He's actually a little bit banged up, so he's not throwing today. But Pedro Reyes is an athlete from there who has got some offers. And then I have not put eyes on him, but I believe they have Cortez Lane, who was originally a sort of do-it-all guy at Camden, that I think is on their roster now as well.
So one of the other names that's out there, you mentioned him a second ago, that's super intriguing to me is Will Wilson. And there's a lot of layers to it. He son of Walt Wilson, the head coach there at R&E, who, of course, was Alshon Jeffrey's high school coach, a local guy, of course, being from R&E, a quarterback, so always of interest to fans, the quarterback position, not only on the field but in recruiting, and has an early offer from the Gamecocks. What have you thought? I think I saw Will in camp earlier this season. What have been your thoughts just watching him, just eyeballing him and watching him throw it around there a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, first thought was like I said earlier, Jody and Dow Loggins just glued to him and to those couple of other teams. So it was very, very obvious. Even if you didn't know who you were looking for, you would know there is some heavy Gamecock interest among some players on those teams because, I don't think those coaches left their side for their first couple of games. And then for Will Wilson, first of all, looks like his dad. That was kind of my first impression, who is Walt Wilson, the head coach there at R&E, former Calhoun County coach, obviously with Alshon Jeffrey back in the day. And just a really big kid, man. I think Will Wilson gets bigger every time I see him. Big arm, has some athleticism to him. Is really one of those guys that I think is still just kind of growing into who he's going to be. I'm very curious to see how big he gets before it's over with. And you can already tell, I remember watching him throw at some point last year, and you can just see the growth already, both physically and in terms of, like, operating his team, motivating his guys, has taken on, like, a leadership quality as well. And like I said, Loggins was definitely glued to watching his games.
All right, Wes, we'll let you get back to watching camp, and we'll give some more updates from you tomorrow. But before we let you go,
it's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. 107.5, The Game.
Yeah, guys, I've been telling everybody who will listen for, I guess, about 2 months now about our friends at Gold Line Framing. They're over in West Columbia. And if you're looking for a special gift for a sports fan in your life and you're looking for something that might be a little bit creative, then I've got an idea for you. So give Kendall Walsh or Joni James a call over at Gold Line Framing, and they're going to handle any and all of your custom framing needs. That could be a diploma. That could be original artwork. That also could be a jersey or a flag, maybe that you want to get hooked up with some custom framing. They've been in business for over 20 years. They're over at 511 12th Street, again, in West Columbia. On location, they have an art gallery, home decor, furniture, and gift items all right there in their store. If you have any questions, you can give them a call. It's 803-739-1337. They are open today because they are open Tuesday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. Excuse me. Even if you can't make it today, they're also open on Saturdays, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. And they're on Instagram at Goldline Framing SC. Again, go check them out. Check them out on Instagram. Give them a call. Whatever's easiest for you. That's Goldline Framing in West Columbia, South Carolina.
All right, we'll let Wes get back to camp. We'll hear more about it from him tomorrow. Chris and I will wrap up today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs, coming up next, 107.5 The Game.
It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs, founded by firemen, with Chris Clark, Wes Mitchell, and Tyler Head, on your home of the Gamecocks, 107.5 The Game.
And welcome back into the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler and Chris along with you for a few more minutes before we turn things over to Jay and Terry for the halftime show. You know, Chris, we've talked a lot about these what-if scenarios when it comes to Gamecock sports over the past day, and we touched on a little bit of them with Mark and Jeremy in the Garnet Trust Hour. I have one that came in at the end of the Garnet Trust Hour that I wanted to mention really quick on the Firehouse Subs text line. It's posing the question of how differently the first few seasons of Carolina and the SEC would have gone had Joe Morrison still been alive and been able to head coach them for those few years.
Man, that is a good one. Shout out for that one. That's a really good one. I feel like the more you kind of sat down and really thought about it, you could come up with a lot of them. I mean, one that, Tyler, y'all might have gotten this one, the 84 season, the Navy loss. I'm sure that
was a big. We actually had somebody call in that was at the Navy game to kind of tell us what the conditions were like. The wind was really nasty, and yeah, any trip a Southern team makes to Annapolis, Maryland in November, it's going to be rough.
One that would probably come up, and I can't, for some reason, I can't remember the name. I see Tommy Moody out there, and I'm waving to him to try to save me on this. But you think about the Carolina baseball team. I think that was 2002. Is that right? And so they played Texas and finished as the runner-up. And so one of the great, questions then is if it was a series as opposed to one game.
That's right.
Could South Carolina have won their first national title under Ray Tanner back in 2002? It was an interesting one too because the Gamecocks had not been to Omaha since 1985.
Right.
They get back there. It was kind of similar to 2010 because they lost. They were on the verge of being eliminated. Yep. Lost 11-0 to Georgia Tech. Won 4 straight, including 2 against Clemson. So kind of shades of what would eventually happen in the future.
Right.
But then they played Texas in what was then the national title game.
Yeah, just one game.
Just one.
And what year did they change that format?
I don't remember the year that they changed it. I don't remember. But maybe somebody can hit us up on the Firehouse Subs text line and let us know. But yeah, so just one game they lost, and that was that. You finish as the runner-up.
Right.
Of course, later on, once they change that rule, it becomes a series. And so that was a great Gamecocks team. And so presumably they would have had, maybe a better shot then. I know there was a lot of conversation then, but so many what-ifs. And I'm going to be honest, out of all, I really like Mark Benoit's what-if that he gave of the Sindarius Thornwell flu game.
Had a couple of those.
That was a really, really good one. I think I have a hard time shaking free from that 2012 Florida loss.
And that's the one that you brought up on Twitter when the original question was posed from On3's Twitter account with the picture of Joe Burrow in his Ohio State uniform. And that's a whole nother rabbit hole we could go down, certainly. But yeah, you brought up that 2012 game against LSU, which, as we've mentioned on here, was just an unfortunate scheduling quirk where you play LSU and Florida in back-to-back weeks.
Yeah, and I think even more, thinking about it more, the LSU game was closer, so you kind of point to that one. But when you look at the Florida game the following week, that's a divisional game, and you played pretty well still defensively overall. I mean, I laid it out earlier, 150 yards total for Florida offensively, but you, South Carolina, played so poorly, so many turnovers. Again, that was another flu game or something. About half the team was sick from what we've heard, all accounts. And if you win that game, you're in Atlanta. And now, I don't know if he would have beaten Alabama in the SEC title game, but you would have had a shot. That 2012 team, I wasn't around for the 84 team, so I couldn't give an apples-to-apples comparison. It was obviously a really, really good team, but most people that I talked to who were either around for both, certainly people who were associated with that 2012 team, think that was the best team in school history. And you go look at the names on that team. There were so many good players. They were so deep. They were so talented. And they would have at least had a shot in Atlanta. So that to me will always be the greatest what if. That was probably the best shot that South Carolina had to, if they there were other instances where they could have won games and made it to Atlanta again.
Right.
I think that was the team that had the best chance to get to Atlanta and actually make some noise. And
So we finally got an answer on when they changed the College World Series. I'll give you that right after you tell people about our friends at Amy Mason Cup.
Yeah, all across the country, drivers are reaping the rewards of not only driving safer, but saving money on your car insurance. You can do that with the Drive Safe and Save app from State Farm. When my family was looking to switch and save on our insurance, we turned to Amy Mason Cup State Farm. Her team took care of the rest, and they can help you with all sorts of policies, personalized quotes on home, auto, business, boat, renter's insurance, life insurance, any insurance products. South Carolina native, local agent. Visit her website at amymasoncup.com. That's Amy, MASINCUPP.com. If you want to go visit her, 612 St. Andrews Road, Suite 4 in Columbia, right off I-26, or 772-5554. Ask her for a personalized quote, but also about the Drive Safe and Save app from State Farm. That's our friends over at Amy Mason Cup State Farm. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
Would you believe they changed the format the very next year, 2003? Isn't that something?
I'm speechless at that. Yeah, a great what if. We need to come up with a ranking of these.
I forget. Was it Mark that brought up the point of like having almost a tournament bracket of what ifs and like pairing them against each other?
Yes.
That's a project for this summer, definitely.
Yeah. But then we'll inevitably leave one out. Somebody, you forgot this one. You're like, that's the best one, and we left it out of the field. So let's make it a big field. We'll put 64 teams.
We'll accumulate as many as we can and put them head to head and see who comes out the winner.
Yeah, we need to do that. Let's make that a project.
All right, that'll do it for today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Halftime show with Jay and Terry coming up next on 107.5 The Game.